Welcome to the YouTube channel Bookworm. Today we will listen to a brief retelling of the following book, Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. The life, extraordinary and amazing adventures of Robinson Crusoe, a sailor from York, who lived for 28 years all alone on a desert island off the coast of America near the mouths of the Orinoco River, where he was thrown out by a shipwreck, during which the entire crew of the ship except him died, with a statement of his unexpected liberation by pirates, written by himself. Robinson was the third son in the family. A darling, he was not prepared for any craft, and from childhood his head was full of all sorts of nonsense, mainly dreams of sea voyages. His older brother died in Flanders fighting the Spaniards. The middle one went missing, and therefore they don't want to hear at home about letting the last son go to sea. The father, a sedate and intelligent man, tearfully implores him to strive for a modest existence, in every way extolling the average state, which protects a sane person from evil vicissitudes of fate. The exhortations of the father only temporarily reason with the 18-year-old undergrowth. The attempt of the intractable son to enlist the support of his mother is also not crowned with success, and for almost a year he breaks his parents' hearts, until September 1, 1651, he sails from Hull to London, tempted by free travel. The captain is the father of his friend. Already the first day at sea was a harbinger of future trials. The storm that breaks out awakens repentance in the soul of the disobedient, however, subsided with bad weather, and finally dispelled by drinking, as usual with sailors. A week later, on the Yarmouth roadstead, a new, much more ferocious storm flies. The experience of the team selflessly rescuing the ship does not help. The ship is sinking. The sailors are picked up by a boat from a neighboring ship. On the shore, Robinson again experiences a fleeting temptation to heed the harsh lesson and return to his parental home. But evil fate keeps him on his chosen disastrous path. In London, he meets the captain of a ship preparing to go to Guinea and decides to sail with them. Fortunately, this will not cost him anything. He will be the captain's companion and friend. How will the late Robinson, wise by trials, reproach himself for this prudent carelessness of his? If he were hired as a simple sailor, he would learn the duties and work of a sailor. Otherwise, he is just a merchant making a lucky turn on his 40 pounds. But he acquires some nautical knowledge. The captain willingly works with him, while away the time. Upon returning to England, the captain soon dies and Robinson sets off on his own to Guinea. It was an unsuccessful expedition. Their ship is captured by a Turkish corsair, and young Robinson, as if in fulfillment of his father's gloomy prophecies, goes through a difficult period of trials, turning from a merchant into a miserable slave of the captain of a robber ship. He uses it at home, does not take it to the sea, and for 2 years Robinson has no hope of breaking free. The owner, meanwhile, weakens his supervision, sends a prisoner with a Moor and a boy jury to fish at the table, and one day, sailing far from the coast, Robinson throws the Moor overboard and persuades Ifzuri to escape. He is well prepared. The boat has a supply of crackers and fresh water, tools, guns, and gunpowder. On the way, the fugitives shoot living creatures on the shore, even kill a lion and a leopard. Peace-loving natives supply them with water and food. Finally, they are picked up by an oncoming Portuguese ship. Condescending to the plight of the rescued, the captain undertakes to take Robinson to Brazil for free. They are sailing there. Moreover, he buys his launch and faithful jury, promising in 10 years, if he accepts Christianity, to return the boy's freedom. It made a difference. Robinson concludes complacently, having done away with remorse. In Brazil, he settles down thoroughly, and, it seems, for a long time. He receives Brazilian citizenship, buys land for plantations of tobacco and sugar cane, works on it in the sweat of his brow, belatedly regretting that jury is not around. How an extra pair of hands would help. It is paradoxical, but he comes precisely to that golden mean with which his father seduced him, So why, he laments now, should he leave his parents' house and climb to the ends of the world? Neighbors' planters are located to him, willingly help. He manages to get from England, where he left money with the widow of his first captain, the necessary goods, agricultural implements, and household utensils. Here it would be nice to calm down and continue his profitable business. But the passion for wandering, and most importantly, the desire to get rich sooner than circumstances allowed, prompt Robinson to drastically break the established way of life. It all started with the fact that the plantations required workers, and slave labor was expensive. Since the delivery of blacks from Africa was fraught with the dangers of a sea passage and was still hampered by legal obstacles, for example, the English Parliament would only allow private individuals to trade in slaves in 1698. After listening to Robinson's stories about his trips to the shores of Guinea, the neighboring planters decide to equip a ship and secretly bring slaves to Brazil, dividing them here among themselves. Robinson is invited to participate as a ship's clerk responsible for the purchase of blacks in Guinea, and he himself will not invest any money in the expedition, and he will receive slaves on an equal basis with everyone, and even in his absence, companions will oversee his plantations and watch over his interests. Of course, he is tempted by favorable conditions, habitually, and not very convincingly, cursing vagrant inclinations. What inclinations, if he thoroughly and sensibly, observing all the melancholy formalities, disposes of the property he leaves behind? Never before had fate warned him so clearly. He sailed on the 1st of September 1659, that is, 8 years after his escape from his parental home, to the day. In the second week of the voyage, a fierce squall came up, and for 12 days they were battered by the fury of the elements. The ship leaked, needed to be repaired. The crew lost 3 sailors, a total of 17 people on the ship, and it was no longer up to Africa. It would be more likely to get to land. A second storm is played out. They are carried far from the trade routes, and then the ship runs aground in the sight of the earth, and on the only remaining boat, the team gives itself to the will of the raging waves. Even if they do not drown, rowing to the shore, the surf will blow their boat to pieces near the land, and the approaching land seems to them more terrible than the sea itself. A huge shaft the size of a mountain overturns the boat, and exhausted, miraculously not finished off by the overtaking waves, Robinson gets out on land. Alas, he alone escaped, as evidenced by 3 hats thrown ashore, a cap and 2 unpaired shoes. Frenzied joy is replaced by grief for the fallen comrades, the pangs of hunger and cold, and the fear of wild animals. He spends the first night in a tree. By morning, the tide had driven their ship close to the shore, and Robinson swam to it. From spare masts, he builds a raft and loads on it everything necessary for life: food, clothing, carpentry tools, guns and pistols, shot and gunpowder, sabers, saws, an axe, and a hammer. With incredible difficulty, at the risk of tipping over every minute, he brings the raft to a calm bay and sets off to find a place to live. From the top of the hill, Robinson understands his bitter fate. This is an island, and by all indications, uninhabited. Fenced on all sides by chests and boxes, he spends the second night on the island, and in the morning he again swims to the ship, in a hurry to take what he can, until the first storm breaks him into pieces. On this trip, Robinson took a lot of useful things from the ship. Again, guns and gunpowder, clothes, a sail, mattresses and pillows, iron crowbars, nails, a screwdriver, and a sharpener. On the shore, he builds a tent, transfers food and gunpowder to it from the sun and rain, arranges a bed for himself. In total, he visited the ship 12 times, always getting hold of something valuable: canvas, gear, crackers, rum, flour, iron parts. He, to his great chagrin, almost completely drowned them. On his last run, he came across a chiffonier with money. This is one of the famous episodes of the novel. and philosophically reasoned that in his position all this heap of gold was not worth any of the knives that lay in the next box. However, after thinking, I decided to take them with you. That same night, a storm broke out, and next morning nothing was left of the ship. The first concern of Robinson is the arrangement of reliable, safe housing, and most importantly, in view of the sea, from where only one can expect salvation. On the slope of the hill, he finds a flat clearing, and on it, against a small depression in the rock, he decides to pitch a tent, protecting it with a palisade of strong trunks driven into the ground. It was possible to enter the fortress only by a ladder. He expanded the recess in the rock. A cave turned out, he uses it as a cellar. This work took many days. He quickly gains experience. In the midst of construction work, rain poured down, lightning flashed, and Robinson's first thought, gunpowder. It was not the fear of death that frightened him, but the possibility of losing gunpowder at once. And for 2 weeks he pours it into bags and boxes, and hides it in different places, at least 100. At the same time, he now knows how much gunpowder he has, 240 pounds. Without numbers, money, goods, cargo, Robinson is no longer Robinson. This at the same time is very important. Getting used to a new life, Robinson, doing something one, will always notice the beneficial other and third. Defoe's famous heroes, Roxanne and Moll Flanders, had the same task, to survive. But for this, they needed to master, albeit not easy, but one profession, courtesans and, accordingly, thieves. They lived with people, skillfully used their sympathy, parasitized on their weaknesses. They were helped by intelligent mentors. But Robinson is alone. He is opposed by a world that is deeply indifferent to him, simply unaware of his existence. The sea, the winds, the rains, this island with its wild flora and fauna. And in order to survive, he will have to master not even a profession, or many of them, which, however, he will do, but the laws, mores of the world around him and interact, taking them into account. In his case, to live means to notice everything and to learn. So he does not immediately realize that goats do not know how to look up. But then it will be easy to get meat by shooting from a cliff or hill. He is rescued by more than one natural ingenuity. From the civilized world, he brought ideas and skills that allowed him, in the complete silence of the saddest life, to quickly go through the main stages of the formation of a social person. In other words, to remain in this capacity, not to run wild like many prototypes. He will learn to domesticate the same goats, add milk to the meat table, he will feast on cheese. And the saved gunpowder is still useful. In addition to cattle breeding, Robinson will establish agriculture when barley and rice grains, shaken out of a sack with dust, germinate. At first, he will see in this a miracle created by gracious providence, but soon he will remember about the bag, and, relying on himself alone, in due time will already sow a considerable field, successfully fighting feathered and four-legged robbers. Involved in historical memory, growing from the experience of generations and relying on the future. Although Robinson is alone, he is not lost in time, which is why the construction of a calendar becomes the first concern of this life builder. This is a large pillar on which he makes a notch every day. The first date there is September 30, 1659. From now on, each of his days is named and taken into account, and for the reader, especially those of that time, the reflection of a great story falls on the works and days of Robinson. During his absence, the monarchy was restored in England, and the return of Robinson guessed the glorious revolution of 1688, which brought to the throne William of Orange, Defoe's benevolent patron. In the same years, the Great Fire, 1666, will happen in London, and the revived urban planning will unrecognizably change the face of the capital. During this time, Milton and Spinoza will die. Charles Vaillant will issue the Habeas Corpus Act, a law on the inviolability of the person. And in Russia, which, as it turns out, will also be indifferent to the fate of Robinson. At this time, they burn Avacum, execute Razin. Sophia becomes regent under Ivan V and Peter I. These distant lightnings flicker over a man who is burning an earthen pot. Among the not very valuable things taken from the ship, remember the heap of gold were ink, pens, paper, 3 very good Bibles, astronomical instruments, spyglasses. Now, when his life is getting better, by the way, 3 cats and a dog, also on board, live with him, then a moderately talkative parrot will be added. It's time to comprehend what is happening. And until the ink and paper run out, Robinson keeps a diary so that at least lighten your soul a little. This is a kind of ledger of evil and good. In the left column, he is thrown onto a desert island with no hope of deliverance. In the right, he is alive and all of his comrades drowned. In the diary, he describes in detail his activities, makes observations, both remarkable, regarding the sprouts of barley and rice, and every day it was raining. It's been raining all day again. The earthquake that happened forces Robinson to think about a new place for housing. It is not safe under the mountain. Meanwhile, a wrecked ship is nailed to the island, and Robinson takes building material and tools from it. On the same days, he is overcome by a fever, and in a feverish dream, a man in flames appears to him, threatening him with death because he does not repent. Lamenting about his fatal delusions, Robinson, for the first time in many years, makes a prayer of repentance, reads the Bible, and is treated to the best of his ability. Rum infused with tobacco, after which he slept for 2 nights, will raise him to his feet. Accordingly, 1 day fell out of his calendar. Having recovered, Robinson finally examines the island, where he has lived for more than 10 months. In its flat part, among unknown plants, he meets acquaintances, melon and grapes. The latter pleases him especially. He will dry it in the sun, and in the off-season raisins will strengthen his strength. And the island is rich in living creatures, hares, very tasteless, foxes, turtles. These, on the contrary, will pleasantly diversify his table, and even penguins, which cause bewilderment in these latitudes. He looks at these heavenly beauties with a master's eye. He has no one to share them with. He decides to set up a hut here, fortify it well, and live for several days at the dacha. This is his word, spending most of the time on the old ashes near the sea, from where liberation can come. Continuously working, Robinson, for the 2nd and 3rd year, does not give himself relief. Here is his day. In the foreground are religious duties and the reading of the Holy Scriptures. The 2nd of the daily activities was hunting. The 3rd was the sorting, drying, and preparation of killed or caught game. Add to this the care of the crops, and then the harvest. Add livestock care, add housework, make a shovel, hang a shelf in the cellar, which takes a lot of time and effort due to lack of tools and inexperience. Robinson has the right to be proud of himself. With patience and work, I brought to the end all the work to which I was forced by circumstances. It's a joke to say he will bake bread, doing without salt, yeast, and a suitable oven. His cherished dream is to build a boat and get to the mainland. He does not even think about who and what he will meet there. The main thing is to escape from captivity. Driven by impatience, without thinking about how to deliver the boat from the forest to the water, Robinson fells a huge tree and carves a pirogue out of it for several months. When she is finally ready, he will not be able to launch her into the water. He stoically endures failure. Robinson has become wiser and more self-possessed. He has learned to balance evil and good. He prudently uses the resulting leisure to update a worn-out wardrobe. He builds himself a fursuit, trousers and jacket, sews a hat, and even makes an umbrella. 5 more years pass in everyday work, marked by the fact that he built a boat, launched it into the water, and equipped it with a sail. You can't get to a distant land on it, but you can go around the island. The current takes him to the open sea. With great difficulty he returns to the shore not far from the cottage. Having suffered fear, he will lose his desire for sea walks for a long time. This year, Robinson is improving in pottery and basket weaving, stocks are growing, and most importantly, he makes himself a royal gift, a pipe. There is an abyss of tobacco on the island. His measured existence, filled with work and useful leisure, suddenly bursts like a soap bubble. On one of his walks, Robinson sees a bare footprint in the sand. Frightened to death, he returns to the fortress and sits there for 3 days, puzzling over an incomprehensible riddle. Whose trace? Most likely, these are savages from the mainland. Fear settles in his soul. What if he is discovered? The savages might eat it. He had heard of it. They might destroy the crops and disperse the herd. Starting to go out a little, he takes security measures. He strengthens the fortress, arranges a new distant corral for goats. Among these troubles, he again comes across human tracks, and then sees the remains of a cannibal feast. Looks like the island has been visited again. Horror has been possessing him for all 2 years, that he remains without getting out on his part of the island, where there is a fortress and a cottage, living always on the alert. But gradually life returns to the former calm course, although he continues to build bloodthirsty plans on how to ward off the savages from the island. His ardor is cooled by 2 considerations. 1. These are tribal feuds. The savages did nothing wrong to him personally. 2. Why are they worse than the Spaniards who flooded South America with blood? These conciliatory thoughts are prevented by a new visit of savages. The 23rd anniversary of his stay on the island is underway, who landed this time on his side of the island. Having celebrated their terrible feast, the savages swim away, and Robinson is still afraid to look towards the sea for a long time. And the same sea beckons him with the hope of liberation. On a stormy night, he hears a cannon shot. Some ship gives a distress signal. All night long he burns a huge fire, and in the morning he sees in the distance the wreck of a ship that has crashed on the reefs. Longing for loneliness, Robinson prays to the sky that at least one of the team escaped, but evil fate, as if in a mockery, throws the cabin boy's corpse ashore, and on the ship he will not find a single living soul. It is noteworthy that the poor booty from the ship does not upset him very much. He stands firmly on his feet, fully provides for himself, and only gunpowder, shirts, linen, and, according to old memory, money pleases him. He is obsessed with the idea of escape to the mainland, and since it is impossible to do it alone, Robinson dreams of saving the savage destined for slaughter to help, arguing in the usual categories, to acquire a servant or maybe a comrade or assistant. He has been making cunning plans for a year and a half, but in life, as usual, everything turns out simply. Cannibals arrive, the prisoner escapes, Robinson knocks down one pursuer with the butt of a gun, and shoots another to death. Robinson's life is filled with new and pleasant worries. Friday, as he called the rescued, turned out to be a capable student, a faithful and kind comrade. Robinson puts 3 words at the basis of his education: master, referring to himself, yes and no. He eradicates bad savage habits by teaching Friday to eat broth and wear clothes, and to know the true God. Previously, Friday worshipped an old man named Bonamuki who lives high. Mastering English, Friday tells that 17 Spaniards who escaped from the lost ship live on the mainland with his fellow tribesmen. Robinson decides to build a new pirogue and, together with Friday, rescue the captives. The new arrival of the savages disrupts their plans. This time, the cannibals bring in a Spaniard and an old man who turns out to be Friday's father. Robinson and Friday, who is no worse than his master with a gun, free them. The idea of gathering everyone on the island, building a reliable ship, and trying their luck at sea is to the liking of the Spaniard. In the meantime, a new plot is being sown. Goats are being caught. A considerable replenishment is expected. Taking an oath from the Spaniard not to surrender to the Inquisition, Robinson sends him with Friday's father to the mainland. and on the 8th day, new guests come to the island. The rebellious team from the English ship brings the captain, assistant, and passenger to be punished. Robinson cannot miss such a chance. Taking advantage of the fact that he knows every path here, he frees the captain and his comrades in misfortune, and the 5 of them deal with the villains. Robinson's only condition is to bring him and Friday to England. The rebellion is pacified. 2 notorious villains hang on a yardarm. 3 more are left on the island, humanely providing everything necessary, but more valuable than provisions, tools, and weapons. The very experience of survival that Robinson shares with the new settlers. There will be 5 of them in total. 2 more will escape from the ship, not really trusting the captain's forgiveness. Robinson's 28-year odyssey ended. On June 11, 1686, he returned to England. His parents died long ago, but a good friend, the widow of his first captain, is still alive. In Lisbon, he learns that all these years his Brazilian plantation was managed by an official from the treasury, and since it now turns out that he is alive, all the income for this period is returned to him. A wealthy man, he takes care of 2 nephews and prepares the second for sailors. Finally, Robinson marries. He is 61 years old, not without benefit and quite successfully in all respects. He has 2 sons and a daughter.